Hello everybody, this is Dr. Amira again. This is Assistive Technology, and now we are talking about part 3 of the categories of Assistive Technology. This includes EADLs, electronic ADLs, also known as environmental control units, vehicle modification, computer and technology interface or computer access, and lastly is recreation, sport and leisure assistive technology. So EADLs, in the old days, like I said, we used to call them ECUs. So if you hear anybody saying environmental control units, that is an old terminology. Sometimes it's still used in the, among old practitioners. It is technology that is designed to increase access to homes, businesses, buildings by people with disabilities, obviously, and then control one's own environment. So it is a way to control the environment around you. And this includes accessing homes, opening the door, unlocking the doors, lifts in and out of the home. So sometimes you will see lifts and also ramps to access your home. This is an example on stair lifts. This is obviously designed for outdoors, so it's designed slightly different than it would be indoors. But the client will sit on over here. This is another example on stair lifts that are installed indoors, obviously, and different options. And for each one of those, there are different specifications. Acorn is known in the industry for those stair lifts. I personally have never been involved into one, installing one, but most of those companies will have contractors who will come in and get the right permits and do the job according to specs. So this was an example on stair lift. Ramps are obviously, everybody knows about ramps. They are either permanent or temporary, and you got to maintain then 1:12 ratio for the ramps. And if you're indoors, it's different specifications again than if it's outdoors, and it depends on the weather, if it's rainy or humid, etc. So you just gotta be mindful of the specifications and the quality and how sturdy that ramp is. Now, as far as EADLs also, those are systems designed to remotely control appliances, window shades, lights, thermostat, controlling the TV, controlling the radio, controlling access to the house, opening the door or closing the doors, turning on the microwave, oven, stove, etc. So that any appliances around the house could be wired or programmed. Depends on again, depends on those different devices. And there is the movement of the smart home movement, and there are even in big stores, like Home Depot and Lowe's, you will come across different home designs and home automation systems. Like this one here, you can look at it from your TV, but you're able to control the lights, the cameras, lock, unlock, turn the lights on, off, control the TV, watch whatever you want to watch. This is on the TV, but it can be done from a handheld device or iPad, etc. Now, when it comes to controlling the home, EADLs, then the methods of control or activation are either switches. Those are physical switches that can be programmed to do certain things. It can be also voice control. Think of Siri, for example. Siri, turn on the TV. Siri, do this. Siri, do that. So it can be programmed to do some of those, especially, obviously, you have to have the hardware. So if you're talking about window shades, for example, that have to be opened and closed, then some type of motor or an actuator have to be, rigged to that window shades. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So voice control, hardware, and it can be controlled from switches, voice control, or sometimes automatic sensors. Automatic sensors like, lights in the hallways, light in the bathroom, faucets, for example. You put your hand underneath, and then like the ones we see in airports, for example. You run your hand underneath it, and then it will turn the water on or off. So this is examples on EADLS. Now, vehicle modification is another thing. Now, how often do we do this as therapists, and what is the level of involvement? It depends on what setting you're worked in. I personally did not do vehicle modification, but I did work on the clients in transferring in and out of the car, for example. Think of somebody who have a stroke, and then we need to get that client transferred into the car to go home or to go to an appointment as a passenger. There are people who do more involvement than that. But I was never brave enough to rehabilitate a client to drive a vehicle. It's a lot of liability, and there's also a lot of technicalities too. We can recommend hand controls, small knobs for, mini steering wheels for limited range of motion. You can also control, the different aspects of the car, like the wipers, the lights, the horn. They all can be controlled from a touch screen monitor of some kind, but this is obviously a lot of involvement. And if you are or the client is at a point where they need to be driving, not a passenger, if the client has to drive, then you can do the hand controls, instead of the gas pedals. You can refer them to a specialist. So if you click at this website, EADLS, for example, this one here, you can go and look for people who specialize in driver rehab, for example. This particular here, if you're looking for a certified driver rehab specialist, those are usually clinicians who are, a lot of them are OTs, who are certified to do driver rehabilitation and driver examination. If you are looking for a mobility equipment dealer, then you can click over here, and then you will find a dealer in your area to help you install some of those adaptations. I mean, some of them are obviously, like I said, liability is too high, but usually it's a clinical decision and also equipment decision. So you need to find the right fit for that particular client. Now, these days we're in 2025 now, so obviously there is a lot of self-driving vehicles that can go around, and the client can be sitting in a passenger. They can transfer in and out of the car, and they don't have to worry about driving. So you don't have to worry about hand controls or knobs or blinkers or wipers or anything. The self-driving car does all of that. How does the client get into the car? Usually there are ramps, whether they're side or back ramps. The client will get in. There are different types of ramps, obviously. This is a ramp that is for a van. This goes sideways. This is another sideways, and this one here, it goes. This is a back from the back, and obviously the van itself has to be modified to go lower to the ground. And if you look close enough here, you will see where the van itself has been changed. So that's why it has a hefty price to it. This is not for the ramp. This is for the entire van, obviously. And there are some. This is having to be an Oldsmobile Chrysler. Some vans and cars are more accessibility friendly. They're easier to adapt than others. Anecdotally, that's what I did here. Now, if the client ever gets into a van, then they have to be tied. Not the client, but the chair has to be tied with a tie and lock system. This tie and lock system basically stabilizes the chair against the floor of the van or the car. This is a good example here. So the blue straps here, there are 4 of them, and this particular client, in this case, she's a passenger in the van in the back. So the chair has to be tied to the floor of the van, and this is the tie system we're talking about. So the chair is completely secured to the floor of the van. This could be also a public bus or a personal vehicle. And also on top of that, you see this gray seat belt. This is a 3-point seat belt where it goes the vehicle, goes down in the vehicle, and it goes around the client and the wheelchair themselves. So in event of an accident or flip over, this client is secured. Her chair is secured to the van too. So those are mandated by those tie systems, mandated by the law. Now, raised roofs are another option for vans. So if the van, because clients usually sit higher than a passenger in the van because they're sitting in a wheelchair that is, a few inches higher than. So if they're tall, then they need extra head space. Kneeling buses are a feature on most public transportation buses. And if you look at next time you see a public bus, transportation bus, look at it and it will say kneeling bus. And that means the front of the bus will come down a few inches closer to the ground to allow the client to go in their wheelchair. Obviously, they have to have the ramp from the street level to the van, to the bus, but it will be, this is an added feature in school buses. Adaptive car seats are car seats that would, come down, they would swivel around, they will swivel around. In this case, this seat is a passenger seat and it is turned 90 degrees outward. So the client pull up their wheelchair close to this seat. It's very, very low. They transfer into this, and this seat itself, not automatically, but hydraulically or with motors. It's not a manual system. It's motorized system. Will go back into the van and 90 degrees to the left, and it will look like something like this. So it scoots backwards. Obviously, it rotates 90 degrees to the right. In this case, it's a driver's seat. It's not the passenger seat. And then, the driver just drives away. So we just saw that patient. We could not see the patient, but we get the idea of the patient getting into the car. Now, second to the last category is computer and technology interface. So this is technology, assistive technology that helps us interact with the devices we are using. So in this case, I'm doing this presentation. I am using a regular keyboard, a regular mouse, and obviously a microphone to input. So how I input information as an individual into the computer is I have a mouse that's moving. You can see the cursor. And also I use my keyboard and I use a microphone. Now, how does a client who does not have range of motion or dexterity or does not have voice output or the right coordination or enough vision, how do he or she interacts or inputs information into the system? This is what this category of technology covers. And also, on top of that, how do they receive the information from the computer or the TV or their handheld device? If you are watching this, then you are getting a visual and an auditory information. So if the client was blind, he would not see the visual. If he was hard of hearing or deaf, he would not get the audio output from their device. So we have to find other options for this client. So let's click on this, ways to interact with devices. And this is really a great website here. This talks about eye gaze, for example, pointing devices, adapted keyboard. So this is a really good source to click on, switches and scanning. So if you are in a school system, this is really a good website for you to get some information about this topic. And it's usually, it's either direct access, where you are accessing whatever you need directly. So if I want to click on the word direct, I use my mouse and my right button to highlight it. And the other option would be scanning, which is called indirect access. So those are, we'll talk about that in a second here, where I have a short video for you. So either direct access or scanning is the other option. Now this website shows us different keyboard options. And again, if your client doesn't have enough range of motion, then this is half of the keyboard on the left. This is the QWERTY keyboard all the way from Q to T. And then the other half of it will be the Y to the P, and it will be on a different keyboard. And the space bar is split in between. You can also have a keyboard like this. Just take a minute to think, why would anybody use a keyboard like that? They will have their hand, one hand over here, one hand over here. So this is somebody who has a lot of shoulder difficulty movement or maybe an amputation and they have to use a stylus, for example, everything has to be in close proximity. They can also have keyboard like that. They could also have a virtual keyboard like this. This is a newer technology, so it could be a virtual keyboard too. It could be a square keyboard. It could be different different colors, you know, to emphasize, or this is a textured keyboard. It could be larger keys, for example, with high contrast between the foreground and the background. So there are many options on keyboards. It could be, again, this is high contrast for somebody with visual difficulties or deficits. So keyboards, there are, I don't see it in here, but there's like mini keyboard where the whole keyboard is as size as your iPhone. So it's very small, and you could access that with a stylus maybe, or universal cuff and a pencil or something like that. Now another way to access, which is direct access, is eye gaze. And eye gaze is a built-in or added on device. So this is, they usually have a high learning curve because it takes a lot for the client. Sorry, this is scrolling too much. For eye gaze and any AAC communication, you need those mounting devices. They mount on the wheelchair, on the side of the bed. This is an added note here. If you look close at this over here, take a closer look at this. You see the red dot moving around on the keyboard. Look at the far left corner. This is the client's eyes. So this is obviously a capturing of that screen, but the screen is going to look like that. The client is moving his or her eyes. They dwell on a letter for a few seconds, and then the second they dwell on it, it gets activated, and then the client is typing at the very top over here. Now once they do that, then they can enter that into a computer search, or it can be an AAC device, or gaming, a way to interact with games, or things like that. It works like this. You have a camera, and then you have the user eye. This camera here, or sensors, it does emit, I'm not sure if it's infrared or not, but I have to refresh my memory on that. But it does emit some type of ray that gets reflected off of the iris of the eye in the very back, and then it goes on the screen. By the virtue of going on the screen picks it up, and if the client looked to the right, then this red here, this red dot we saw earlier, is the mouse, basically. So the client are moved, but instead of using a mouse, they're using their eyes to look at it. It does have a high learning curve. It does take a lot of practice because you need to look, and also at the same time, if you look around to the environment, or if you want to look at somebody walking the hallway or something, then you may be activating the wrong buttons. Scanning input is another way of interacting with the computer. So scanning is for people who don't have ability to control their head, like for example this kid, as good as it needs to be for direct access. They can't control their head. They don't have enough dexterity to find dexterity to use their hands. They end up using, in this case, two buttons. The green button, and it scans one block of information at a time. And then once they go into the green block, now in the green block, they're going to go into the other button and to individual cells and select that. So they're scanning block by block. Once they get to the cell they want, they hit their left hand. So it's basically two buttons minimum required for this. They keep hitting until they get to the one they want. So this scanning could be line by line, line by line, sorry, row by row, and or column by column. In this case, they have set up the device to the child to go block by block. And once to get to the block, they hit it, and then individual cells are activated. So it is a cool technology for clients who can't do direct select. Now, Computer and technology interface again is screen magnification. There are a variety of built-in options. We've looked at some of them earlier with the built-in. Screen magnification is really important. It can be built-in or it can be an added-on software. In the old days, we used to add a lot of softwares, but now, you know, the PC, if you click at the link at the bottom, or you can Google that, PC, computer accessibility, also Mac, if you're using a Mac, have a lot of built-in accessibility. iOS devices and Macs are really great for accessibility. iPhone 8, if you use an not 8, sorry, iPhone 8 is old now. iPhone systems, iOS, and iPads, things like that, they're also very friendly, and they have multiple options. If you ever have to train a client on how to use an accessibility feature on a phone, whether it's a Galaxy or an iPhone or Samsung, my suggestion is know how to turn it off before you turn that feature on. Know how to turn it off before you turn it on. It is so frustrating if the phone starts reading everything on the screen, or if you zoom in and the screen becomes so big you cannot find the off button. So my suggestion is either have Siri turned on, and you can cue Siri turn off magnifier. She will turn it off for you, or you have to know how to do it by yourself before. So practice a lot before you recommend any built-in accessibility to clients. Now, recreation and sport is the last category, making sure I'm telling you right. It is the last category of assistive technology, and those can be anything that is really we think of as leisurely activities, toys, and you know, there are switches for toys, there are sensors for toys, playing card shufflers, holders, there are online games, obviously. There's a really famous, I cannot remember his name, famous gamer whose spinal cord injury. You can see him playing games constantly on his, using a sip and puff and a mouth controller. And he's really famous. He's a YouTuber. So people can have a lot of fun even if using the right technology, even if they have disability like that. Sporting, it depends on the sport. You know, fishing is different than skiing, it's different than going to the beach, than hunting, than everything else, you know. So there are different adaptations, technologies for every whatever the sport is. Now I have a homework for you, so we're gonna go back to the second or third screen slide here in a minute, but YouTube or Google this YouTube video. It says A Day in the Life of Richard Devylder, and answer the question, what AT, assistive technology, did Richard use throughout that? It's a 12-minute video. It is really cool. It shows him, he's a man without arms or legs. He was born like that, no arms, no legs, and it shows him from the minute he wakes up all the way, you know, going to the transferring into the power chair, going in the community, going in public transportation, going into the building, going to work. It shows him going to the doctor's appointment, and again going home, eating dinner, you know, doing some work, grooming himself, getting dressed, all those activities. It shows him doing all of that in a 12-minute video, believe it or not. So my homework to you is look at the video, it's at this link, and answer the questions here. Which technology did you see Richard use? Any of the technology, vision, hearing, communication, cognition and learning, seating and positioning, EADLS, environmental control, vehicle modification, computer access, and recreation. He does have a short a clip about doing a recreational activity in there. So this is my homework for you. Again, I hope I did not bore you to death with this presentation. It turned out much longer than what I expected, but if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to collaborate on project, this is my email. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the second part. Well, it'll be the fourth part actually, talking about technology assessment and the process of referral, assessment, and implementation of the plan.